Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of my amazing patrons, who with their contributions every month help keep things running here over at Mortis Media. If you'd like to be a financial contributor to help the channel going, you can find all the information pertaining to that in the description. It is very much appreciated, but entirely optional. But for now, get ready to let the darkness take control. My parents' house has an attic. My brother and I were always forbidden from going up there, because apparently we were prone to falling down the stairs and hurting our heads. As a child, this is something you'd believe. However, when we moved out and got lives of our own, our parents started inviting us back home for the holidays. It was around Thanksgiving, and I had come home for a few days to see my parents and catch up, just before Thanksgiving Day. My mother likes to put out the Christmas decorations the day after Thanksgiving. So she asks me now that I'm older if I wouldn't mind going up the ladder into the attic and helping her get the things she needs from there. I, of course, willingly oblige. I make my way up there and see the box of decorations. I take a moment to take in the attic, a place that for so long I had been not allowed to go into, always seeing it as this dark and sinister place. But it was just an ordinary attic. In the corner, though, something catches my eye. I thought I saw movement. I turn my head, and at that moment I swear I saw a person move into the wall. I just about fall from the stairs and manage to catch myself, my mother running into the room at that moment and asking me if I was okay. I look at her and say I think I saw something in the attic. Then she turns to me with a blank stare on her face and says, "And that's why you were never allowed up as children." Still creeps me out to this day, and I have never gone back up to that attic since. I have a pretty weirdly set up house. To the right of our house, we have no neighbors, and a very big open empty field that stops at a busy road, and across the road is a park. My mum and I live there, and our house is pretty small, but just the right size for us. The kitchen door is less of a door and more of an open living room and dining room connected. Super creepy unfinished basement with an unlocked attic door above the stairs. My room has always felt safe. My mum's room, however, always feels cold and uninviting. When I say home alone, only when I'm there alone, weird things do happen. Although my best friend has said that she has felt some things in my house, like heard noises, felt eerie presences, and cold spots, as well as being watched and touched. I have never been physically interacted with, but every time I go down the stairs, I get an intense and overwhelming feeling of dread and like I'm being watched. I usually end up feeling that way right as I pass the attic door, which is important for this story. So about 6 months back, I started hearing what sounded like rodents in the attic, which very well could be the case. Except I also heard the distinct sound of small shoes. So unless the rodents were taking tap lessons, something was up. One day, I'm home alone. It's around 10 p.m. and I started hearing a rolling sound from the corner of my room. The ceiling, the attic floor, it was the sound of a ball being rolled hard enough to bounce off the wall and go back to wherever was rolling it. Well, I wanted to be sure I wasn't going crazy and went to the ceiling and knocked on it. I was shaking because my house had never really felt safe, but I was never convinced that there were ghosts. Whatever was up there responded with the same number of knocks I used, at the same speed. To say I almost pissed myself is an understatement. One time prior to that, when my best friend was over, she said she saw a shadow in my closet. I have a small shelf above my closet rod, and she says that she saw the shadow of a small boy there. Just last night is the most recent eerie situation. I was waiting for my best friend to come get me after work. I was in my room, which had 2 windows, one to the big field and one to the unfenced backyard. The basement stairs are right behind my head, and the back door is right in front of the top stair. So I'm in silence, finding a YouTube video to watch on my TV, when I hear clear humming from a female voice. Of course, I held my breath and listened. I then heard what sounded like someone pushing against the back door. I ran to my window and looked out. Nothing. It wasn't coming from inside, and a bit later the same thing happened at the front door. Still nothing. Am I being haunted? Is my house just old? Or am I going insane? I've grown up in different haunted homes. When I was 10, we moved to a house that was built in 1902. 2 stories, and out of the town, an old farmland. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms and a large common area. My bedroom didn't have a door for whatever reason, and was in between the other 2. I was laying down in bed facing the door without my glasses on, which, even though I had an awful prescription, I managed to see a girl walk by in what I thought was a nightgown, and called out my sister's name as I thought it was her. The girl didn't even acknowledge me, and just kept on going. When I realized she hadn't acknowledged me, I immediately rolled over to face the wall. The next time something happened was when my twin brother and I were home alone. We were downstairs in the living room, which was directly under the common area upstairs, and we heard heavy pacing back and forth for multiple minutes. We ran and hid, as any scared 11-year-old would, and we told our parents about it, and our dad had also seen things. He'd seen an old man around the house, and then another person outside on the property. We then moved to another home. This one was built in the 50s. It had an attic that was only accessible through a bedroom that had stairs in it. That was my brother's bedroom. My bedroom was the one next to the staircase on the other side. I was in bed and heard the staircase creaking, as if someone was walking up it. I yelled out for my brother to stop because he was keeping me up, and my mum came in and told me that he was in the living room with her. Everyone else was asleep in that house. I never saw actual figures, just dark spots that would move. Then, due to my dad's job, we had to move an hour away. The house was weird. I had to share a walk-in closet with my parents, and I hated that. It freaked me out. My stomach would start churning when I looked at it, and when I had to go in it. It was 10 times worse. I brought it up with my dad, and he told me he could actually see the spirit in the closet, and it wasn't nice. When I was in high school, the house we lived in generally had odd things happen to it. Our cat would freak out and stare at the cabinet, as my mum had porcelain dolls, and the dolls' heads would frequently be facing different directions than where they were placed. The pull chain on the ceiling fan would click, and strange things like that would happen. My room in particular was right next to the attic stairs. They ascended over my closet, and I would quite often hear what sounded like scratching behind the wall where the stairwell was, and footsteps right above my room in the attic. Easy small animals getting in the attic, right? We found a small child's bed hidden away in the corner of the attic. When we asked the neighbors, we found that the old owners had a small child that passed away. One night I was home alone and was about 16 at the time, and I heard what sounded like a closed door bouncing against the doorframe. I went upstairs because the only possible closed door would be the attic. Sure enough, it was bouncing back and forth against the frame. But that wasn't it. The door handle was jiggling and turning back and forth as the door bounced. I did the only logical thing at that point, shoved the ironing board against the door and sprinted down the stairs, out the back door, and went to my neighbor's house until my mum came home. A few years back, one of my best friends and business partner was and still is a single dad. His ex-wife was in and out of mental institutions for years, and he had sole custody of his 2 kids, a boy of 10 and a girl of 14. My friend had to travel to New York in order to oversee the multimedia setup for the auto show for the Ford display. I was back at the office with the programmers during the day and would stay with the kids each evening. Their house was a new 2-story rental in the woodlands of Texas. The development was built in a heavily wooded area just north of Houston. Weird stuff started to happen at night while I was there. I was watching TV with the kids when the lights would go off in the den. The light switch was on the other side of the room. I went over and the switch was turned off. I thought it was a problem with the breaker, or there was another set of light switches. But if there is another light switch, who turned it off? I flipped the switch on, and the lights returned, so we went back to sit down. The lights came off again. I walked back and found the switch flipped back down to off. This disturbed me, and went on for a while. I asked the kids if this had happened before, and they told me that every now and then the lights would go. So now I'm trying to act unconcerned in front of the kids. Suddenly, there was a loud crash in the attic. We went upstairs and opened the attic door to check. There was nothing there. It was completely empty, and thus no explanation of what had made the loud noise. I was thinking that there was someone else in the house. Their mother had showed up unexpectedly before at their old house, but she was in jail at the time and supposedly did not know this address. Things quieted down, and it was eventually time to go to bed. I let the family Labrador check all the doors and made sure they were locked, then went up to the guest bedroom, which was between the kids' bedrooms. I left my door cracked, and I had just turned the bedside lamp off, and as I was lying down, I saw the silhouette of a boy crouched between the cable box and VCR lights on the other side of the room. I thought the sun was getting ready to try and scare me, so I turned on the bedside lamp and said, "Gotcha," but there was no one there. Then there was another loud crash in the attic. This woke up the kids, and now they were scared. We then heard a door slam downstairs. I told them it was a new house thing, and that noises happen, and told them I would sleep in the daybed out in the hallway. I made my rounds again, and we all went back to sleep. When I woke up next morning, the kids and the dog were all asleep on the floor next to my bed, and I still had 4 more nights to go. I had to go to work that day, and when I got back to the house it was getting dark. The wind was starting to pick up, and all of the tree limbs were swaying. There was thunder in the distance, however the kids seemed fine. I helped them with their homework, made dinner. Nope, we weren't going to McDonald's again, and we were all finally ready to settle down and watch TV. The storm was worsening, and there was more thunder and lightning. The den in the house was huge, with large floor-to-ceiling windows, and the walls went all the way to the rafters. There was an interior balcony on the second floor that wrapped around 3 of these walls, and there was an exterior balcony facing the backyard. You could see through the upper windows out to the lower part of the outside balcony. So now the rain is coming down in sheets. The wind is blowing and bursts of lightning. Suddenly, the daughter says she sees something moving out on the balcony. I look up, and it looks like a pair of legs in dark pants scurrying past one of the windows. So I'm thinking, do I get the gun out of the master bedroom? But that opens up a whole new can of worms. So I run back up the stairs from the kitchen to the second floor hallway and out through the balcony door. The wind is blowing cold rain right into me, and I get soaked, but I don't see anyone there on the balcony. I go back downstairs and tell them that there's no one outside. Shortly thereafter, I tell them that it's time for bed, and the son goes right to bed and goes to sleep. The daughter is afraid of storms, and the dog won't go in her bedroom, and her cat is nowhere to be found. I tell her I'll sit with her until she goes to sleep, and I bring a chair into her bedroom and set it on the left side of her bed. We talk about storms, and I tell her about being in a tent in the army during really bad storms, and how nice it is to be in a house for this one. We both fall asleep. There's a loud clap of thunder, a flash of lightning, and I see a dark figure of about 5 feet tall standing in the far corner of her room. I jump to my feet, but now I don't see anything. I don't want to wake her up and carefully walk around her room to check the hallway and slowly sit back down. I eventually doze off again, and later I hear a noise and started looking around. The cat is curled up on the foot of her bed, and the dog is starting to lay down at my feet. The storm has passed, and looking outside her bedroom window, stars are shining up above the tree line. I go lay down in the daybed out in the hallway, and just as I fall asleep, I hear the door downstairs slam shut. It sounds like the kitchen door to the garage. I go downstairs. The kitchen door, door to the garage, and front door are all shut and locked. And I start to walk over to the master bedroom suite, but something tells me not to go there. I head back upstairs and lay back down. What seems like seconds later, the alarm goes off, and it's time to start a new day. I have breakfast and go, and it was my turn to drive school carpool. This story is very twisted. It also took place at a neighbor's house. The neighbor's nanny is a very kind-hearted old woman who has been babysitting and looking after the neighbor's kids and their large family for about 10 years now. She's a wonderful old lady who doesn't mean harm to anybody. She's also good friends with my mother. As in, some days when my mother is sick or something, the neighbor's nanny will come over to babysit my younger brother. She told me this story one day when she had come over to look after him, when my mother had gone out to the city to visit my grandparents, as my grandmother was very ill and it was an emergency. She told me that strange things had been happening in the next door house. One night, the mother of the house woke up to someone banging from the backyard porch, almost as if someone was stomping. She was pretty scared, and since her husband was out of the country that week, she, along with the nanny, went out to check what was going on. Now bear in mind, Nanny used to sleep in on those days when the husband was out of town, and the mum and her little kids were alone at home. So basically, the nanny went out down the first steps and behind her followed the mum. And this is exactly what she told me. She walked down the steps towards the glass back door, and she pulled back the curtains to see a super old man with a white beard, all the way down to his elbows, standing there looking at her. He wore white clothes and had a plain dead expression plastered on his face. Trust me, every bit of it is true. She screamed, let go of the curtains, and the mother, who was still tailing behind, came rushing. But when they both pulled back in order to check, to the nanny's utter shock, there was no one there. After this event, the mother made sure that she, the kids, and the nanny all slept in one room until the father came back from his business trip. Fast forward a few days later. The father had returned, the kids were at school, and my mother and the nanny were cleaning out a musty old closet in the attic. There were quite a few old boxes and dusty old bags being kept up there, with stuff like old pictures, clothes, or children's toys and souvenirs. Now, this closet that they were cleaning was high, so the mum used a stepladder in order to elevate herself so that she could easily look inside and take things out. Basically, the mother was up on the ladder cleaning out the closet and frequently tossing down dusty boxes and bags in order for the nanny to start looking at. Anyway, one by one, Mum was throwing out dusty cardboard boxes full of old toys or clothes packed away long ago, when she came across a small box. Surprisingly, it was packed up in fresh tape but smelled really bad. It seemed practically empty, as it was very light. Mum peeled away the tape and opened the box and peered inside. That is when she screamed in horror and threw it to the floor and began to cry. The nanny, who was standing below, watched as the box fell to the floor, entirely unaware of what was inside. She slowly stepped forward and took a look inside, and there was a doll, who she later found out used to belong to the mum, and it was very precious to her since a young age. The doll just lay there in the box, but on its plastic neck, someone had used a knife to make slashes and cuts. Now, since it was made of plastic, it was very obvious that someone had not tried to cut the doll's head, but simply made deep slashes on its neck. The most shocking part was that the doll was packed away about 15 years ago in the box by the mum. She loved the doll, and it held many childhood memories, but she didn't want to throw it away, so she packed it up. And literally no one had entered the attic for ages, as it was upstairs and only had old, unimportant boxes. I don't know if the doll was linked to the old man, but it happened within that very week. So that remains a question unanswered. How did the doll get those slashes when it was safely tucked away and no one can touch it? And who on earth was that old man? I am a 21-year-old female from Europe. I live in a semi-big town behind the local cemetery. Now, I've always had experiences before with the paranormal since I was a child, like seeing apparitions at night, feeling presences and seeing spirits in my dreams. They didn't happen all the time, but enough for me to know that they were real. I also have a few friends that have a sixth sense, if you want to call it that have helped me through the years with these experiences. These experiences have become less as I got older, especially when I started university. But I can still feel presences when they appear near me, although I have never been able to see them or talk to them when awake. I did meet them through time to time in my dreams though. I didn't talk to them a lot, depending on what the dreams were about, or if I knew that I was dreaming. But I remember them being in those dreams because the feeling of their presence always lingered for a bit after I woke up. Over the past 6 months or so, I've been trying to pay more attention to my sixth sense and try to train it, as I always thought of it as an essential part of myself, but could never really bring myself to train it properly. because I was scared of seeing things like in horror games, or making a mistake and accidentally getting the attention of a bad spirit. As far as I've known, my house has never been haunted. It isn't that old either, maybe 25 years, and we have been the only residents, but I start to get paranoid when it gets dark. My room is in the attic, while all the other bedrooms and whatnot are on the ground floor, and we don't have a basement. And when I walk through the corridor up the stairs at night, I always feel like I'm being watched. I also get the same feeling when I'm showering at night. I just don't trust the mirror or window, though it's high enough that people cannot look inside. I've occasionally seen figures in my peripheral view, but they never move and just disappear when I look at them directly. I also feel like something will run from behind me, if not looking, even if all the doors are closed, except my parents' room, which is always open, even when they're asleep. Though I've never felt something coming from their room. So I made it a habit to walk around with my phone's flashlight at night and occasionally look behind me. It became worse a few months ago when I had a nightmare of these shadow people. In the dreams, I was standing in the corridor and I knew something was wrong, when all of a sudden I hear people running down the stairs, and lo and behold, the shadow people were running in broad daylight, down the stairs through the corridor and exiting through the window of my old bedroom on the ground floor. There is one of them that stopped and looked at me in the eyes, with just its white scribbly circles grinning at me, with a smile that almost looked like that of a Cheshire cat, before he also went into the room and disappeared when he goes through the window. And at that moment I realized that they had come from my bedroom where I was sleeping. I woke up in terror, turning all of my lights on, and did the best to calm down before trying to go to sleep again. Another time, one of the Velux windows in the attic had mysteriously opened when nobody was home, and all of the doors were locked. And even though I don't think it had anything to do with the paranormal, I did remember I have this big cupboard in my room that leads to a small area behind the wall that's big enough for two people to sit down. A few years back, that same window was open along with that cupboard door that is always closed. So I went to open it up to be sure nothing was hiding there. But as I was opening it up, I suddenly got the feeling a presence was there that I didn't recognize and that maybe wasn't so good-natured. I couldn't open the door enough to peek in because my shoe rack was in the way, so I grabbed my phone to try and film if anything were there. The first few takes it didn't want to record properly, but in the end there was nothing of interest, and the video didn't capture anything either. My mum and stepdad know that I feel things, but we don't really talk about it a lot, and I don't really have the need for it either. But my stepfather has said that he feels something weird in this house from time to time, and it's only in certain places, but he can't explain it either. Nothing majorly dangerous has ever happened. I don't think I'm in danger, but I wanted to know if any of you guys have experienced something similar, and how you can get rid of shadow people. This happened about 30 years ago. I was the ripe age of 23 and ready to move out of my parents' house for the first time. My parents had been saving some money in order to give to me for when I wanted to move out, in order to put forward that money for a house. That, coupled with my grandmother's recent death, meant that I had accumulated quite a sum in order to try purchasing my first home. This was a while back when homes were cheaper, and it wasn't anything fancy. I knew I wouldn't be able to afford anything fancy, but I was happy with the idea that I would have my own space for the first time in my life. Whilst looking for places to live, did a friend tell me that he had an uncle that was selling a small rundown house with accompanying land, at an extremely reasonable price. I jumped at the opportunity, had a look around, and even though it had clearly been neglected and was most definitely a fixer-upper, I thought to myself that I could move in pretty quickly and do it up as I lived there. That was a mistake, but I didn't know that until now. The house was quite run down, as I said before. Not all the windows would close all the way. Some of them were sort of stuck. The wood was peeling off, the locks didn't work, and the door was hanging on by its hinges. Those were also falling off. I knew it was a lot of work, and my parents were adamant that I should look elsewhere, but it being not too far from home, and still not far from the city, despite being a fair bit rural, meant that it was idyllic for what I wanted. The first 2 months were challenging. I ended up not moving out like I expected, leaving half my stuff there, and living back in my old room in my parents' house, which they weren't so thrilled about, as they wanted to sell and downsize, and they couldn't do that with me living there. But anyway, in the 2 months that I lived with them, I had saved up enough money to start making some serious fixes in the house and give it some much needed tender love and care. Over the following weeks, did a guy called Barry come over. He was a general handyman that the guy who sold it to me knew, and was helping me with the repairs at an also very reasonable rate. He and I seemed to be getting on quite well. For context, I am a female and an only child. Not that that's important, actually. And I thought that we had a good connection, despite him being at least 25 years older than me. But I saw him like a nice, protective, fatherly figure in a sort of way. We got chatting one evening when he finished doing some adjustments to the locks, and then he started coming on to me. I suppose I was being a bit generous with the beer, celebrating how much progress we had made. And just by the eyes he was giving me, I knew his intentions were a bit more than what I had in mind. I had to shut him down some way, so I just told him there and then that I had a boyfriend, kind of slipping it into the conversation. He went quiet when I made the pass-by comment, and kind of sat there, a little bit bummed. I guess with him being a bit drunk, he was showing his emotions a fair bit more. Sitting there, gloomy, he stood up, wobbled, and said he needed to pee. Walked out the house, and didn't come back that night. We spoke over the phone the next day, and I think, judging by his chipper expression, he had forgotten what had transpired last night. I was hoping he'd forgotten that he'd made that pass in the confidence of being drunk, and hopefully, with me not offering any more alcohol, that situation should be avoided in future. During the next few weeks, he came round as scheduled, helped me out, and everything was as it was. I was happy. The house was coming along fantastically, and he was just making some adjustments to the attic, which was somewhere I still didn't really want to go. You see, there were still some boxes up there that belonged to the people who lived here before, and although this was now my house, I didn't feel super comfortable going through people's things, especially as from what I know, they were dead and didn't have any relatives to hand this stuff over to. He was just changing the locks as they had fallen through, and the attic door was just swinging wildly in the ceiling. The story really begins now. Now that you have the background, of course, you'll understand why everything that took place did. So all the building works were finished, my house was looking good, and anything else that needed to be done, I was confident I could finish myself, or just didn't have enough money to put into yet. It was a typical summer's day, quite warm, and I had just finished work. I came home, had a shower, and sat myself on the sofa, ready to watch TV, and eat dinner on a little tray. As I was munching down my food, did I hear a noise above my head? It sounded like footfalls in the attic. Bear in mind at this point I'd only been in the attic about twice and had vouched not to go there until it was absolutely necessary to clean it out or to put things in. These noises were freaking me out, but I told myself that there were animals that had probably gotten in and tried to think of that. I kept on watching my show, but the noises persisted. Whatever it was that was up there didn't care that I could hear it, which made me more confident that it wasn't a person and that it must be an animal. The noises stopped not long after, but the next morning I woke up and one of the windows was slightly ajar. That was weird, I thought. I closed the window, telling myself I must have opened it while I was tired in order to let the air in, and then closed it at night, but obviously not well enough. During the next few weeks, I kept feeling uncomfortable, that someone was watching me in the house. It was a very unpleasant experience. And after a few more days of this, did I have the courage to tell my dad that I was feeling uneasy and ask if he could come over and look around. He did, and didn't find anything suspicious. That's when he asked me about the attic. I told him that I hadn't been up there, and he said that he'd like to take a look just to check. He went up, had a look around, and then let out a yell. He found newspapers, chips, all kinds of junk food up there, and was starting to get panicked. I came up, and that wasn't the worst of it. There were some Polaroid photos of me asleep, of me in the shower, all kinds of creepy pics. Someone had been up here. Someone had been taking pictures, letting themselves in and out of my house. I only just noticed that there were actually small holes that had been drilled from the ceiling down into some of the rooms, so that you could look down these little peepholes and see into my life. I was beyond horrified. It turns out that the toilet had this little plastic ceiling ventilation that you could quite easily pull up if in the attic, given where the hole was. That's how whoever this was had gotten pictures of me in the shower, as I didn't have a curtain, I just had glass. I was so horrified. I took the pictures off my dad because we had to contact the police. After a lot of back and forth, they asked me who had access to the house, and I said no one, that I'd only just purchased it and that I'd recently done a renovation. They asked if it were possible that someone who had helped me renovate may have a copy of the key, and that's when it hit me. I remember now that the handyman who'd been helping me out was the one who'd offered to put in all the new locks, and therefore it could be possible he had a key. I was absolutely horrified at the thought, and when they went over to his house to question him, he confessed there and then. Not only that, it was pretty obvious because he had more Polaroids of me just sitting on his kitchen counter. Well, case closed, I'd say. I didn't want to press charges. I just filed a restraining order, and fortunately, have not seen him again. I never felt safe in the house after that. I sold it after about another few months and moved 3 states away. I couldn't live anywhere near him, knowing that he was in the area. This incident happened a few years ago. It was around 9 p.m. Me, my mum, and my sister were getting ready for bed. It was around the middle of summer, so it was a hot night. My sister was sleeping in the living room because her room was too hot to sleep in, which was normal for us to do. We all say our goodnights and head for bed. 5 minutes later, my mother wakes me, in a panic, with my sister clutching to her side. My mum tells me to get a bat and search the house for any intruders, so I did. I found nothing, doing a very thorough search, and I come back into the living room and ask what happened. My sister kept hearing a voice that said in a very threatening way, "There is no escape." Keep in mind, our family are hard believers in the paranormal. We also are Wiccan, and we have a protective barrier around our house, so there's no way an evil spirit could have gotten in. The next day we went out and brought sage and other herbs to cleanse our house, and since then, we've never had another experience. To this day I'm still afraid of our house. The only spirits left in the house is an old man that lives in the attic, though he's a friendly spirit, so I doubt it would have been him. My only other explanation is that an evil spirit threw its voice through the barrier and into the living room, but that wouldn't explain how we haven't had any other problems. A month or so ago, I was watching exploring videos on YouTube of abandoned houses and the like. I had the urge to do so afterwards, so the next day I went to school, came home, packed my exploring bag, and went to an abandoned house in the countryside, which took about an hour to get to by bus. My friends were strictly suggesting that I don't, but I decided to do so anyway. My grandparents only lived a half hour from there. I was recording this. The house had multiple floors, a basement, first and second floor, and an attic. The casual house. It was pretty run down, and there was a lot of trash. I began by going into the basement. It was quite a creepy experience, and there were multiple dead animals, and a cross that was thrown on the ground. I was creeped out, my heart beating like hell, and I still managed to cope with it and get to the first floor, which apparently had a living room and a kitchen. The kitchen's cabinets were full of mold, and the living room had a bashed TV, and there was some red liquid on the old couch. It had soaked it in. I didn't know what it was, so I can't assume. I was disgusted, and the smell was almost unbearable. After exploring the first floor, I went up to the second. It had a bedroom, a bathroom, and the bedroom had a bed which was collapsed, and the sheets were rotten, with a lot of holes, and again, another red liquid that had apparently soaked through. The smell in the bedroom was crazy, and I knew I needed to leave there as soon as possible. The bathroom had a broken mirror and a bathtub, which had human excrement at the bottom of it. Moving up to the attic, this is where I really had to get out of the house and make a run to the bus stop. The attic had bones, though I'm not sure what bones, possibly an animal's. It was too crazy for me, and I got out of there as quickly as I could. I got the bus and went home to take a shower, and went under my blankets and got cozy. Though the crazy part begins here, my phone had the recorded footage, right? No. When I checked it, the footage was corrupt, and the video was 0 seconds, all black, and displayed an error that it couldn't be played. I, of course, was very disappointed, but continued on with schoolwork. I got home after school. The second day after going to the abandoned house, I checked my gallery. We had to draw something similar to what the teacher had drawn on the chalkboard, so I had snapped a picture. When doing my homework, I looked in the gallery, and there were the chalkboard pictures. But there was also a picture which featured some sort of distorted face. That was not a picture that I had taken. Since my phone is always with me, I know that none of my friends could have taken it and tried to be funny about it. The weirdest thing is that the picture was allegedly taken on the day I had explored the house, though when going home, there was only the corrupt video. I deleted the picture, thinking I probably accidentally downloaded it. However, I realized I was wrong. The pictures came every day, every single day, and they had the same date, the day I went to the house. I had also performed a factory wipe on my phone, had the system apps, but still, the image kept coming back. The examples of the picture are distorted faces, blurry pictures, and what I assume being a foot, and windows, and other stuff. When I tried uploading them to Discord, they can't be uploaded. It just says, error. The pictures have slowed down now, and they only appear on my gallery every 4 or 5 days or so. The weirdest part is that I got a picture of a rock with something engraved on it. I am very, very scared. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to give again a huge thank you to all my amazing patrons who can be seen on screen. Your help is invaluable to me, really, and I really appreciate everything you do and your contributions every month. It really does help a lot with everything here. So seriously, thank you. If you'd like your name featured on this list, as well as a few other fancy perks, you can find the information in the description. Completely optional though, but it's always pretty nice, but don't feel obligated. If you liked the video, something else that would really help me out is if you dropped a like and left a comment with your thoughts. That's really nice. And you can subscribe if you're new here and press the bell icon for more stories every night, as I do post pretty frequently. If there's a story you'd like to share, feel free to send it to me by email or post it on my Reddit page. I know this is arbitrary to most of you, but big news for us is that we finally picked up enough watch hours on our Wizard channel and we applied for monetization, which is a really big success for us, and we're really happy for that. I hope it gets approved. That'd be nice. And yeah, I haven't spoken about that in a while, but there's a second channel which I link in the description if you want to check out, and you want to face reveal and stuff. We're also pretty close to 150k, which is a very exciting milestone. We only hit 100k about Halloween, so I think for about 6-7 months, growing another 50k is, wow, it's mad, it's really good. So thank you to everyone who stops by and listens, it really means a lot. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to wrap this up, and yeah, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.